Bellular did an oopsie. Seems pretty common nowadays.
There's a few serious things to talk about. We're going to do that, and then there is an actual update to the story so that everybody can be up to speed. So, number one, basically what happened is, through a failure of our own internal processes, and quite frankly, me just not thinking about it, on Saturday when I published a video, we ended up publishing a video that was recorded way earlier, that was out of date, but it was out of date to the point where, as, spreading out to people, you would watch the video and you would get the wrong impression, which is absolutely not okay. And the primary two victims in a
God forbid people think for themselves.
situation like that are, of course, the developer, who deserve to not be. Again, it's like, whether it's, ill-intentioned or an accident, somebody being misrepresented is somebody being misrepresented. So that's number one. And number two, of course, is you, the viewers. Whenever you click in a video, you should have a, pretty high confidence that there's going to be no bollocks involved. So let's talk about that. Overall then, the failure. The first thing I'll say is we have published our own editorial guidelines. This is a document from last year when we were trying to tighten up a lot of our own processes so that we could do things better. So we published that. You can take a look at it. It's over in the community tab. Now, let's talk about the story itself. So, it's a story on the video game Dark and Darker. We've done quite a few videos on Dark and Darker, basically because it's a pretty fascinating subject. We'll get into it later. The developers got quite a unique story. They were on Steam, they were off Steam, they had a successful off-platform launch, and essentially this video is covering them coming back onto Steam. So the video we recorded was written and recorded at the start of last week. Thing is, though, there were a lot of other stories going around, and basically we thought, given stuff with Starfield, stuff with Dragon Age, that those would probably be stories our audience would be more interested in, so we ended up basically delaying the publication of the video. It did actually go out to our members earlier, and it ended up that that video was being published on Saturday. The problem is that by Saturday, the developer had made essentially two fairly major updates, and we'll go into those today. And that means that the out-of-date video was not accurately representing the situation.
Dark and Darker is the game where they're getting sued for copying or something like that. The situation, I'm assuming that's the situation?
As of the time of that going up. Now, the way that video went out is I published it on the train back to like a family home on Saturday. I pretty much unplugged from the internet until Sunday night. That's when one of our guys noticed people making us aware of the problem. Thank you for that, by the way. Those comments are extremely appreciated, and it's because of that that, we actually did notice. And as soon as I was aware, of course, I did pull the video down. It was initially privated. I've
Get to the meat.
set it now to unlisted, and it'll be linked in the description of this video. My thinking there is it had to immediately be privated because you do not want like a misrepresentation to be spread out by the algorithm, but absolutely not something we're trying to hide from. So if you want to check out the video yourself, then yeah, you can do that. The link is down below. So it's absolutely a failure on our part. When I say our, I would say that is like us as a team and policy, and then when I say common sense, that is very much my own common sense, because ultimately I am the person who hit the publish button. Really, there should have been some sort of red flag.
Sounds like he's actually absolving a lot of his own mistakes here, because he is the owner of everything that gets published. He is literally the owner of the channel and whatnot. So, everyone makes mistakes. They made mistakes. I pushed that upload button. Okay? Sounds a little bit like, trying to skirt away from responsibility.
Like saying, hey, you recorded this video ages ago, are you absolutely sure? To be completely honest with you, I just didn't think I was going through a list of tasks. That's stupid, and that obviously meant a not good situation happened. The other side of that is policy-wise, and basically content reviews post a video's publication being delayed are now a built-in point of process for us. Basically, my thought there is that if you do something because you remember, like, that's fine in most cases, but human error is going to slip in. You're not going to have 100% hit rate, and that means that you've got to have systems that are pretty damn watertight. For me, an inspiration here, one of the YouTube channels I watch a lot of is Mentor Pilot, and it's seeing how in the aviation world they drill on checklists so that things aren't really left to chance. So this is now
Yeah, no shit.
a pre-publication checklist item for videos. that is the way that it is. Whenever there
Wait, why didn't you have that from from the start? That's kind of questionable because what he's talking about is not an uncommon thing in almost any job. Even if you're stacking boxes, there is a checklist of things that you must do in order so you know that you do not screw up. So I'm not sure why he's talking about this like this esoteric ancient art of doing something properly. Seems pretty common.
there is a delay from the sort of recording and initial intended publication date of a video. So if that gets bumped, there will then automatically be an editorial process to ensure that nothing has changed for the story. Now, of course, this is the sort of thing that does happen loads, and there's plenty of videos that come out.
Also, this is questionable because he's effectively talking about, well, you know, what happens. He's kind of entering a bigger dilemma of the world that we live in. What happens to a story if the story is unraveling? You post about what's happening in the story and it is posted, but one day after, a lot of new things come into light. Do you remove that story? Are you forced to remove that story? Because the information you are providing no longer is accurate to the story, but it was accurate when you first talked about it. So this is a pretty complicated subject.
With an addendum or that we scrap because they're no longer in date. What happened in this case is the team were working on other things, and I just did not.
Also, considering you're taking this much of a completely moronic stance, honestly, we're gonna check stuff like that out and blah blah blah. So, are you gonna delete videos where the story evolves later on down the line? And if you wanna be so accurate of your news, doesn't that mean that you should, I don't know, something happens in day one and you wait now 10 days mandatory so you know that you have the most accurate representation of the events? Doesn't that kind of put that responsibility on you if you're going to claim you always need to get everything right? It's kind of nonsense.
Not have the common sense when it came to hitting the bloody button, which is shit. So, the TLDR basically is, nobody really thought about this, me especially, and the way to get around this problem is via systems and policy so that it can reliably not happen again in the future, and that is why this is essentially a checklist item as a part of the video publication process, because this stuff cannot be left to chance. Now, on the topic of Dark and Darker and Iron Mace, honestly, it's a really fascinating story. I'm going to get you up to speed, and then we'll talk about the new things. The good thing is that the new things are good positive updates that the games community have received positively, which is absolutely great news. So my TLDR was that it wasn't like an ideal situation, right? It was obviously like a bit of a misfire, but I really felt it was a pretty honest oversight from the developers rather than anything that was like particularly malicious. After that in the video, I quickly recapped their pretty hardcore legal history. It is quite something.
Is that legal history over, by the way, now?
Really is. It is actually a real interesting story, and it's one that we've covered.
Because I remember the Dark and Darker thing. I'll give you the quick, too long, didn't read drama version of this. So, Dark and Darker make their game, and then some company sues them for it because they are using their trademark stuff. And people completely misunderstood what the lawsuit is actually about. Because people were thinking, oh my god, well, if it's a dark dungeon because they're making the same game, now they're suing Dark and Darker because their game is also set in a dark dungeon. That is dumb. You do not own it. Yes, but that was not the lawsuit. The lawsuit was about the fact that people who made Dark and Darker previously worked at that game and that they took trade secrets away, aka how the game is supposed to function and so on. So, Dark and Darker would never exist if these people didn't work there, and thus taken ideas from the other company and implemented to create Dark and Darker. That is the dispute. Now, how it ended or has it ended, I have no idea. I would assume it hasn't ended at this point.
A few times on the channel as it has developed. And then I tried to end the video on what I thought was a high note, basically saying, hey, extraction-style gameplay is moving out of shooters and into other genres. That's because of Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery. Now, whenever I mention Legacy, Steel, or Sorcery, which is just one of the ones in my head because it is extraction, it's in a fantasy setting, I did disclose that I know that dev because, I mean, for ethical reasons. I mean, there's no financial, relationship or anything like that. It's more, we just chatted in Discord a few times, but still, that does bias me towards that game, or at least towards mentioning the game, which, I obviously did. So from my point of view, I disclosed that so that you would understand why I happen to have that.
Man, Bellular has really become such an absolute pussy since he got into those two bad takes like a month ago or 2 months ago, or how long ever was it? He has just been so spineless since then.
Game on my radar. My overall take, though, is I think the extraction gameplay format is actually really damn good, really compelling. I'm actually not as interested in it in shooters myself, but of course, playing WoW and, a lot of associated games, that in a fantasy setting is really good. I think that could be actual crack. I totally, though, understand how a lot of people saw that. I mean, me looking extremely out of touch. Because, of course, when that video was recorded, it was way in the past. When it was published, a lot of facts had changed. And that means that, a good faith interpretation of watching that video
Can we
is,
get the facts,
why
please?
the hell is this guy not saying any of these new things that we know happened? Why on earth would he do that? And of course, when you raise that question, I mean, a lot of not particularly good answers will immediately appear in your head, and that is a totally fair thing. Of course, what it was a failure of process and common sense, and I suppose the less you have common sense, the more you need process, so definitely going harder on the process. As I said, you can check out our editorial guidelines, which are posted on the community tab. So, that's that situation. My number one apology is to Iron.
Dude, you already did that. What the hell? Is the video starting over again? Is there some kind of magical loop? What the hell?
With that being said, there are those updates to the story, and I absolutely have got to talk about them, especially because it's actually really good news in that they have been positive. So, there are 2 post-launch updates. Let me go through the info, and then we'll review what some of the numbers have been like on Steam. So, 3 days after launch, on the Monday test after the weekend, testing began on a new version of the free-to-play normal mode. This would remove item restrictions and allow gear up to legendary grade. Then the implementation was that matchmaking would be based on gear in 2 user pools. So user pool 1 is functioning the same as before, with gear limited to a score of 25, and then user pool 2 is everything past that score limit in a new version of normal that would be allowing all gear up to legendary, with the intent that this mode captures the classic chaos and destruction. Now, this is still in testing. It's something that Iron Mace are in flux with, and of course they're leaving themselves a little bit of space to alter it in the future if they find that it doesn't work, which of course is completely reasonable. They're testing in new game mode. They say themselves, keep in mind that the gear cap can and will be adjusted in real time to rarity that best suits normal dungeons. Now, this is mostly being done by server-side fixes and lifting limitations, so it actually works really well as an urgent solution, right? It does mean that there's not a massive need to just go in and rework the game's whole feature set. So, the next update, and I think this is what particularly, this is such a clear L on our side, because frankly it wasn't on our radar, which is stupid. It should have been. It's irresponsible for it to have not been on our radar. The second update happened.
I mean, can someone donate a spine to Bellular at this point? It's not even funny anymore. Yeah, you did a mistake. Either ignore it or live up to it. No one cares which one you choose, honestly.
On Friday, and it is the platform link. Basically, that had launched. And what it is an account transfer sort of system that lets people transfer any progress from their existing non-Steam network to their Steam profile, crucially with no need to repurchase. And actually, the idea that somebody who had bought the game on the prior platform, that they would then feel like they had to go and buy the game in Steam, that is one of the reasons why the developer originally chose to do that free-to-play launch. Basically, they were doing the free-to-play launch while they were working on the progress crossover system. Now, there are some caveats with the system currently. This is presumably just because it was implemented pretty rapidly post-launch. I mean, it is a plan that they had, but I suppose given the unanticipated number of very initial negative views, they probably hastened their plans, and that was almost certainly the right move. But here's the restriction. So you cannot connect to a Steam platform account account if you already had characters on your Steam account, and you need to have no purchases associated with the new Steam platform account. And with that,
That's
Iron Mace
annoying.
basically just said, in this case, they recommend creating a brand new, clean account on the new platform to link your previous account. Now, there are some other criticisms that have been raised by players that were also considered there. So there's people concerned
I mean, people are going to get annoyed with that, that's for sure.
with the potential for pay to win, as paid players could simply buy good gear rather than looting it, and then enter the newly available upper tier of the normal mode, while free-to-play people just could not trade at all. So, free-to-play accounts will be getting the ability to buy items from the marketplace only, while legendary players will be able to use the marketplace and the trading post freely. So that basically gives free-to-play players the ability to compete on the same playing field, though of course with with no trading restrictions. If you're a paid player, you
So Dark and Darker has a huge pay-to-win problem, it seems like, or am I missing something?
will obviously have an easier time overall. And of course, big picture for a game like this, I mean, I do see free-to-play as see if you enjoy the game experience, but if you do, I mean, that's obviously when it makes sense to go and buy the game, so the dev gets money for the game that they've made. Now, as a way of making sure that paid people don't feel like their value has been diminished, they have also got a full-sized stash upgrade from the shared stash. And they're going to do more stuff to make sure that the legendary players feel valued. So, in both cases here, the devs have
Effectively, they're going to add Paul, but okay.
these are updates
Sounds
that are driven
good.
by player feedback, and they have iterated on this stuff pretty damn rapidly. The free-to-play normal mode change can basically be seen as a sign of the devs listening and just trying to go as fast as they can, and as Iron Mace themselves admitted, they simply didn't see the initial shitstorm coming, right? Because they just had their own view on how people would appreciate the original mode. Of course, what's a mark of a great dev is whenever that view was challenged by the player base, well, they rethought their assumptions and they got to work on remedies seemingly immediately. So
Yeah, that's good.
let's talk about the results of that. Following the first patch, Steam reviews were still mixed. You could basically see about a 53% split. That was on the 11th, right? So this is as of the time of one of our screenshots. By the 17th, though, things had largely changed. I think it's one of those situations where when you see somebody listen, be honest, change their mind, and do the work, people will broadly think no harm, no foul. And it's positive to see that in action because the reviews, at least as of this screenshot, are back up to 70%. I imagine by the time a few hours have passed and this actually hits the internet, they'll probably be a bit higher. And certainly in terms of the numbers, I mean, you're talking about just shy of 20,000 user reviews. That's a hell of a lot. So I mean, it does look like this has been quite the success. Now, that being said, not every single one of those reviews will be from a paying customer, so we'll have to see what the revenue's actually like for the dev. I suppose for their sake, hopefully pretty good, given the legal stuff that kind of could be hanging over them.
The legal stuff is still happening. Very interesting. Because again, I'm actually interested in legal stuff more. Again, people have a complete misunderstanding of the dark and darker legal things. Oh, they violate trademark, but you can't trademark a torch in a dungeon. Well, you can if it's literally your idea of how the torch works and whatnot. And again, I wonder what's gonna happen because the company that sued them initially wanted them off Steam. That was a whole bonanza, and well, at the end they're back, but so they are still in the process of the lawsuit, which I kind of expect to be true because this is probably something that's not gonna take just 2 years to resolve or a year to resolve. Hell, shit like this does never take as fast as a year to resolve, unless Dark and Darker give up. And considering their numbers, they're not going to give up. But the thing is, I mean, this is kind of the moral, ethical dilemma that's actually interesting in this case, and you don't need to play this game to be a part of this conversation. Think about this, boys. So, Dark and Darker is a good game. Pretty much everyone can attest to that. It is fun, it is great, it is interesting, it is an overall good game. But because is it a good game? Should we as gamers forgive it for stealing another person's game that they were making, another studio's game? Because the people from that studio left and then used what they learned about the other game in making and then made Dark and Darker from that basis. Also, the argument, well, even if they did that, Dark and Darker now is different from their initial vision, that doesn't matter. Because they still used they stole a vision from another studio and made it into their own thing, and then they just branched out. So I wonder, how are you feeling about this situation? Because I personally think if the courts find that, yeah, Dark and Darker devs literally took all their knowledge from the previous game that they were working on and then just made Dark and Darker before them, and it was purely based on the other game's concepts, ideas that they were trying to make, I think Dark and Darker should pay for that. Obviously, I think that would be. I think that would just be fair that they have to absolutely get shreked because of it. But again, options.
The thing that's real positive is when we actually take a look at the player counts, you can see that they've basically surged upwards. I mean, you're looking at just shy of 55,000. Who knows how high that will go? That's incredible. And I think it does show extraction style gameplay. That risk reward, that bit of spiciness, people absolutely love it. And it's why I'm actually...
Nah, people don't like extraction shooters. They just like good games. Nothing to do with extraction shooters and FPS and arena shooter or whatever. Just good games.
Actually pretty bullish of this genre outside of shooters. Of course, there's plenty of potential within shooters, and I know there's lots of games. I mean, Tarkov, obviously. I know the Tarkov modding scene has certainly got a little shot of life given everything that has happened with Tarkov. But still, I think this is really cool. We're seeing extraction gameplay outside of the shooter do fairly well. That's just exciting to me. It being applied to, to fantasy, which is the genre that I kind of like the most. That's just exciting.
Oh, there's a lot of item slots here. What do we have here? A bottle, a bottle, a bottle. These are potions, right? So these are miscellaneous items. You got your typical boots, pants, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it's pretty decent, and 2 different spell books. Okay.
Which is the genre that I kind of like the most. That's just exciting. That's cool. And this certainly does look like a really good success for Iron Mace. One where essentially it's what we all would want to see. A dev who listens to feedback, starts to solve the problem, and ultimately succeeds on the underlying strength of their own work. So, hats off to them. Hopefully, this gets them perhaps some more resources. And hopefully those resources help this game grow. Certainly, if you have player numbers like that, I mean, you can go the distance, right? Like, that's enough to make it right up Steam charts. So, good luck to them. And I suppose we'll all be waiting and interested in what base they do have. That is it for today's video.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Bellular is just so cucked now, it's insane. Anyway, this is Squizzer saying bye-bye.